Hello everyone, my name is Reed and whoa, who is this man talking to me? Have no fear, I'm just filling in for Jake who currently has some problems with his voice. But don't worry, he'll be back in a few days. In the meantime, if you have any feedback for me, just leave it in the comments. Thanks. Anyways, let's get down to business, shall we? Today we're going to be reading some pro-revenge stories. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. You won't pay rent? Good luck finding a new apartment. So this happened to me about 10 years ago in a big city on the West Coast. I had just finished grad school and was looking for a way to cut down on rent in an already expensive rental market. Now mind you, I was young, desperate, and inexperienced with roommates at the time, and this was a huge life lesson for me and hopefully for my roommate as well. I placed an ad for a roommate on Craigslist, which in hindsight wasn't a very smart move. Enter bad roommate. Bad roommate was a few years older than me and at first seemed really cool with a stable job as a licensed masseuse. After interviewing her, hitting it off really well and getting to know each other for about a month, we rented a loft in downtown around October with the agreement rent and utilities would be split. Around the time our first rent was due, November, bad roommate said that her work had been slow and she would pay rent in the next 2 weeks. Luckily, I had enough in savings, so I covered rent. Well, the 2 weeks came and went and still no rent. When I asked her about the rent, she yelled obscenities and accused me of being abusive and harassing her. No kidding! While claiming she didn't have money for rent, she would be out of the house from around 9 a.m. till around 2 a.m. visiting friends. All of this nonsense continued on as well as other things, such as stealing my food and breaking some of my belongings, including a bottle of wine that my recently deceased sister had gifted to me. Bad roommate's excuse was bad energy in the house, while giving me a little smirk. Fast forward to the beginning of December and you guessed it, still no rent. This time, in addition to yelling obscenities, accusing me of being abusive, and breaking my stuff, bad roommate called the police on me, accusing me of making threats. The cops didn't do anything as there was no evidence I did anything. For the record, I didn't. But they did give me a lecture about making threats and said next time they come out I could be arrested or forced to leave the residence. By this time, I was almost out of savings and was fearing eviction. Bad roommate had not paid rent since we moved in. The final straw came when I came home from work to find her threatening my 2 cats who were cowering in the corner. I almost lost it, but due to what happened before with the police, I didn't want to poke the fire. This is when I remembered the officer saying I could be forced to leave the residence and a light bulb went off in my head. Now, the revenge part. I called my best friend whose father, best friend's dad/attorney, was an attorney. After a phone consultation with him, he told me to pay up the rent and utilities through December and then simply surrender my key, garage remote, etc. with a signed note saying that I surrender possession of the property with a specified date. I snapped a photo of this note and left it with the secretary in the management office. I then proceeded to sign a new lease with the last of my savings. 1 week before Christmas, while bad roommate was out visiting friends, I packed up all of my belongings and left the house pretty much empty except for the little bit of belongings she had, a little bit of food and her bed. After about 2 days of angry voicemails, text, and missed calls from bad roommate telling me what a horrible and irresponsible person I was to do this, boom! Dead silence until April. In April, I was served with a summons for breach of contract for abandoning the lease by the landlord. I contacted the attorney, aka best friend's dad, and filed a response to the court with a hearing date set in late May. I showed up to the hearing with my friend's dad, attorney, and his 2, I'm guessing they were assistants. Bad roommate was also there looking smug. Think wine bottle incident smirk. Next thing I know, the other attorney announces they are dismissing me from the lawsuit since I surrendered possession of the property, but they were not dismissing it against bad roommate. Bad roommate's face went gaunt. The smirk disappeared, and it was priceless. After some back and forth with her almost getting held in contempt of court for outbursts, the judge ruled against my roommate with full judgment awarded to the landlord. The first cherry on top, best friend's dad represented me pro bono. The final cherry on top? I came to find out a month later via an angry voicemail from bad roommate that after being kicked out of a friend's house while couch surfing, her credit was trashed. She had an eviction on her record and subsequently could not get another apartment, and that again, I was a horrible, irresponsible person. I never heard from her again afterwards, but she was on the news a few months later, mugshot and all, for trashing a convenience store. Last I heard, she moved to Las Vegas. In the end, my credit did take a small hit. Even though the suit was dismissed, the debt was put into collections and reported to the credit bureau. For the next 4 years, I tried unsuccessfully to have it removed. At the 4-year anniversary of the lawsuit, I petitioned the credit bureau under the advice of my friend's dad/attorney to clear my record as the statute for filing suit had expired at the 4-year mark. Failure to comply with the request would result in a lawsuit against the credit bureau for slander of credit. To be honest, I just followed his instructions not knowing what I was even talking about. A couple days later, I received a call that my record had been cleared. Long story, but in the end, it was worth it to get back at the otherwise horrible person. Ouch, that certainly is a terrible roommate. You fire me for talking about unionizing? I'll spill all your dirty secrets. I used to work for a plasma collection center back from 2008 to 2010. Even though I was a certified phlebotomist, I was placed up in reception and I slowly worked my way up to senior receptionist and trainer. I was also training for quality control and was known for keeping detailed notes of issues that were in need of fixing/training, which I would forward on to management. Some of the things I'd keep track of were violations of FDA and GHA, German health authority, since we were run by a German/Swiss company, as well as OSHA issues. Because I wasn't seeing anything being done, I eventually stopped reporting the issues to avoid being labeled a troublemaker and just kept time/date info, and if I could, I got pictures with date stamps just to cover my own butt in case something bad went down. Fast forward to June of 2010, and I was talking with one of my coworkers about the proposed cuts to benefits and the high turnover rate at our center. They were complaining to me about being afraid to call in sick because others had been fired for it, and I mentioned that they were putting donors in danger by us being sick since we weren't allowed to wear face masks unless we were in the back in the donor area, and even then it was the clear face shields to prevent getting hit if someone leaked on us. Without thinking about it, I talked about how unions protected against this sort of thing in other medical fields and how that might be something we should consider to help protect us. The coworker got weirdly quiet, but I figured it was because I was talking about a subject most people don't like to talk about. Nothing really happened until about August when another coworker grabbed my ponytail while I was working with a donor and yanked me down on it, jerking my head back. I'd informed everyone I worked with to never touch my hair because it was a trauma trigger for me from being abused, and so this coworker knew I would wind up in panic mode from this. She'd seen it happen before when a donor touched my hair, so this was deliberate. I remember telling her to not do that again or I would make her get away. She, of course, walked up and yanked my hair even harder, and I hit her. The supervisor went into damage control mode as I fled the area, still in a panic response, and one of them cornered me and demanded I write down what happened because I had assaulted someone on the property. I wrote my side as well as told them to check security footage since the camera was aimed right at the booth I was working at and had clear view of the events. Turned out, everyone else told an entirely different and creepily similar story than what I told, and the footage couldn't be found even though less than half an hour had passed. I was fired for assault less than an hour later and escorted off the premises after being given 5 minutes to clear out my locker and get my belongings. So, on to the revenge, which was two-pronged. My partner was there on that day and saw what happened, and tried to offer to write up what he saw, but was denied. So the next time he went in, he wound up being screened by the coworker who yanked my hair, who didn't even get a write-up for assaulting me, and asked her loudly enough that the whole reception area could hear, "So, how's those 50 shekels of silver, Judas? Was it worth it?" Which left her in tears, and another person had to finish screening him. He wound up being banned for 6 months for his attitude, but he claims it was more than worth it. While this was going on, I had been reaching out to the various organizations and departments that oversaw plasma donation and collection, the FDA, OSHA, CDC, GHA, and the like. I informed them of the fact that we always cleaned prior to an inspection, but we didn't keep things that clean day to day and suggested a surprise inspection should be in order. I also handed over copies of everything I'd collected and tried to report, but always got shut down. I learned a few months later that all of the management and several of the other techs and supervisors were all suddenly reassigned, and the FDA, GHA, and OSHA had all slammed fines on the center for violations dating back almost the whole time I worked there. TLDR, don't freak with the person who keeps meticulous notes and has nothing left to lose. Lesson learned, if you're gonna be a jerk, don't also be breaking the law. How I cost my employer over $50,000 and got them banned in the USA. A bit of backstory. I'm an American who has dual citizenship in both the US and Canada. I work for a Canadian trucking company operating in America. I've been driving a semi for the last 4 years, so I've seen some crap and I know what I'm doing. I also have zero tolerance for BS. I come from a strong military family and I was in the Coast Guard. The story. Things started off great with this company. I was paid more than my previous job, and I had more freedom to work when I wanted, and the dispatch guys were really cool. It was a small company, maybe 12 people total. They hired me as an independent contractor even though I was just an employee. Remember this, it's important later. I started seeing red flags early on, but I ignored them because I needed the job. Small stuff like calling me at all hours to take a load, not giving me a load they had promised, stuff like that. Things got worse over the 9 months that I worked for them. They started falsifying my driver logs, doing this is illegal, so I could have more time to deliver the load and they wouldn't have to pay to reschedule. They stopped answering my calls and texts unless they needed something and would dispatch me to the wrong address, only telling me the correct address once I was within 15 miles of the first destination, usually around 50 to 100 miles from the correct place. I put up with this BS because, like I said, I needed the money. But they crossed the line when they stole/lost my personal belongings from my truck. Let me explain. I was going in for leg surgery mid-November and wouldn't be able to drive for 3 months. They knew about this months in advance and told me that I could park the truck in the usual spot a couple miles from my house. They had another driver take my truck with everything inside to the office in Canada without telling me. They then had this driver remove my stuff from the truck and put them in storage. I only found out about this when I went to get some stuff out of the truck and it wasn't there, and I called the office. I drove to the office in Canada, about 70 miles from my house, to get the stuff out of the truck, and it wasn't there. My stuff wasn't freaking there! I talked to the guys inside, who then called the driver, and after about 2 hours, no one claimed to know where my stuff was. I called and texted at least 4 times a week for 2 months to see if they had found it yet. And every time they'd brush me off as usual, saying, "Don't worry, it's fine, no problem," before hanging up. I sent them an itemized list of everything that was missing from my truck, over $900 worth of stuff, along with the state law stating that they're responsible for my missing belongings. All I was asking for was to be reimbursed for the cost of my belongings. Another month goes by and I hear nothing. Now, I'm fuming. They moved my truck without my knowledge, they illegally removed my things from the truck, they either lost or stole my things, and these idiots don't even have the decency to pretend like they care. I'm done. Screw these guys, time to enact my revenge. The revenge. I gave them one final chance to make things right because I'm stupid, I guess. And as I expected, they did nothing. So I gathered all of my documentation that I had collected about their wrongdoings over the 9 months that I worked for them, hours of service violations, L&I violations, FMCSA violations, and the IRS violation when they filed their taxes after miscategorizing my employment status. I then sent it all to the appropriate federal agencies. I called the office and told them that I quit and that they had brought this upon themselves. I didn't say what I had done. But also because of how they treated me and their lack of caring for when they lost my things, I also filed a theft report with the police as an added "suck my taint" to the office. They were found guilty of numerous federal violations, theft, and IRS tax fraud. They had to pay fines totaling over $50,000, plus they had to pay me a little over $7,000 in back pay. The owner got arrested for tax fraud and the entire company was banned from operating in the USA, which was over 90% of their market. The IRS sent me a check for $2,000 for reporting them. Apparently this tax scheme had been going on for a while. All of this could have been avoided if they had just done the right thing from the start. Don't mess with truckers! I guess in hindsight, they probably should have just paid the $900. The more you know. I hope you have an amazing day, and if you liked the video, then feel free to check out another one somewhere on the screen right now. Also, subscribe for more stories. Thanks for listening along.